This is my free BMW. A viewer and now friend of mine gave this car to me after he saw me give mine away. Now we get to restore it. It's not exactly put together. Needs some work, but it also came with a bunch of new parts. Let's get this thing cleaned out, see what it came with, and get started on this inspection. Now before we get into all these parts, let me introduce the car to you. This is a 2008 BMW 335i with the N54 twin turbo engine. It is one of my favorite body styles, 4 doors, really slick. I believe BMW calls this color sparkling graphite metallic. These N54 engines are absolute monsters when they are running right and well maintained, and they can no doubt give an M3 a run for its money. Let's start with the front end. We got adaptive and xenon headlights, I believe. We got factory fogs. Front bumper's in pretty rough shape. We got quite a few dents and scrapes. Paint starting to flake there. We got a sweet little puppy dog. We got some holes. Hi, Sage. We got some holes in the front bumper. Excuse me. We got some holes. You're sick. We got some holes in the front bumper. Somebody's been putting some license plates on. We also got a little bit of a sticker wrap on that front grille. Little M colors there. Same story on this side. Headlights are super hammered. Paint's looking decent. This fog's sort of falling out. There's a big old space there. That fog's a bit broken. We got these stickers all over the car. Anthony did not put these on. I got this car from Anthony in March, and he got this car in April of 2023. So he was working on it and lost steam and decided to give it to me. Previous owner had all these stickers on there. He barely got to drive the car. We got some more damage here on the front left corner of the bumper. This front left fender looks like it's been painted before. It doesn't have much clear coat on it. Doesn't match the rest of the car. Similar color though. Wheels are pretty dirty, pretty scratched up. Got some curb rashes here, a lot of paint missing around the lug bolt areas, but no big deal. They still roll, and we got 4 tires. How old are these tires? In case you guys didn't know how to read tire dates, 4119, that's the 41st week of 2019, so these are only about 5 years old. Side marker looks like it's LED, maybe some aftermarket tinted variety. We got some damage here on the driver's side door, some paint scuffs there. Got some paint scuff on the rocker here going down. Looks like maybe some delaminating on the driver's side door handle. We have an original BMW window, aftermarket little convex mirror there. This rear left door looks perfect. Just need to get that sticker off of there. Factory BMW window, factory BMW window. Back side of this rocker's not too bad. No real damage there. Rear left fender looks pretty good. See no imperfections in this rear left fender, so that looks nice and straight. Got some chicken poop on the wheel, that's me. This rear left wheel, it's just dirty, but probably has a little bit of the same curb rash on it. Coming back to the rear left bumper, was definitely hit there. Got all that spider web cracking in there. But to be expected with the plastic bumpers on these cars. This car is, what, 16 years old now. This makes me think that this was replaced from this accident. This was a used taillight lens. I think that's what happened. This has got to be a used taillight housing. It's got this weird hump going on the bottom of the bumper. Based off what I feel back here, it feels like someone towed off of it. But we got this sick dual exhaust. It feels pretty sturdy. Seems like someone mounted it up correctly. The trunk looks to be in good shape. I don't see any damage on there. There's this aftermarket wing that was installed with double-sided sticky tape. And yeah, that's going to need to get re-glued and or removed and buffed out. We'll think about that one. The roof rail covers here are delaminating, so maybe we could do something about that clear coat. And then these rear window seals, if you guys remember from my giveaway restoration video, those always fail on these E90s. Bottom strip is still there surprisingly, but this thing's going to need all new seals on the rear glass too. Probably end up picking this badge off. We're going to debadge everything that is not factory, because if you guys have seen my content, you know I'm a bit of a OE purist. Looks like there was an impact here too. We have that same type of spider web cracking right here, and it kind of flows into there. A little bit of a scuff there. Need to get that tow hook cover painted. Other than that blemish there, looking pretty straight coming into the right rear fender. Right rear fender looks good until we get to right about here. This thing got pretty banged up. We got some pretty big dents there. Nice scratch type gouge down to bare metal that runs across this length and then up into this right rear door. We got a gas cap, that's good. What up? Right rear door, got to pull that sticker of course. Couple more little blemishes, a little bit of a dent right there. Front right door, door line looks decent, and then this part right here is pretty rough. Don't know what happened with this car, how it got the damage or what the story is, but it's got plenty of paint blemishes. But you can't complain for a free car, right? I mean, we're gonna do our best and we're gonna try to bring this puppy back to life. Now, this right side rocker's got some proper damage here. It's pretty loose. You can see that thing took a pretty big impact down there. Someone put some staples or some baling wire to try to keep that flap in there. So we'll have to pull that off and see what's going on there as well. Front right fender looks pretty good. Maybe a little scratch right there, but nothing too much. Now the interior is a different story. The interior is really clean. The door panels are in great shape. The dash is in really good shape. It's got a dash cover on it. I haven't seen any blemishes or imperfections. My last E90 did not have the screen either. I forget if this is CCC or CIC, but that's a really nice bonus. Someone was having a good time in here, that's for sure. Cup holders need some work, but you guys know me, we can easily do those. But I mean, the seats are in immaculate shape. The leather is really nice, and I think it's going to restore really nice as well. Center console seems to be in good shape. We did have that popped up just so we could bypass neutral. Rear seat, same story, really nice shape. Leather's really dirty, but it looks like it is all complete in really nice shape. Those stitches in the back aren't splitting like my other E90. The headliner looks to be in decent shape as well, and I think this leather is going to clean up beautifully. Same story over here. Classic E90 door handles. These things just turn to goo. They get so disgusting, and we're going to need to replace those because you get sticky hands from closing the door. Used to happen to me in customers' cars. All the other people's hand funk, you know. Got to get that cleaned out. Glass coat paint protection. I wonder what kind of paint protection they put on this thing. Driver's side door is really clean. Just got those classic E90 scratches down in here. So we'll see about getting those replaced on this car. We got the little shifters on the steering wheel. Sweet. And driver's side seat is great. Really, really nice seat. So I got the trunk all cleaned out, and I think it'll clean up nice. Just looks like maybe a little bit of light staining on the carpet, and the car did not come with a battery, so that's going to be one of the first things that we need. As far as the hood goes, going to need to assess once we get it cleaned up. Not really sure what these spots are, but thinking maybe they'll wash out. Once we get this thing rolling decent and assess it, we'll get her washed and kind of recheck the paint after that. But let's tear into the engine, everybody's favorite parts of these 335i's. So a little bit of backstory. Anthony tore into this car as a cheap project that he picked up. He replaced the valve cover. He also replaced all of the fuel injectors, and based off the parts that I'm seeing, it also looks like he replaced all of the ignition coils as well. He pulled the intake off, replaced the high pressure fuel pump, and then he took out the oil filter housing and the oil cooler. So that's when he reached out to me. He said, hey, I tore into this car. I'm not a big fan of it. I kind of lost steam on it. Do you want to take it on as a project of your own? And I said, hell yeah. Let's see if we can do it. So we got our work cut out for us. She needs some work. But luckily, the car came with all of the parts that were taken off and then some extra goodies. I mean, check out these turbos. Comes with brand new turbos that he bought. They are cheaper versions from eBay, so we're going to have to really go through them. Maybe even send them out like he recommended before we slap those puppies on. But let's see what we got. We got a new oil pan gasket with aluminum bolts. Looks like we got the gaskets and the troubleshooting guide for the turbochargers. We also have a new fuel pressure sensor for the rail, this guy right here. We have the old high pressure fuel pump, some old ignition coils that I found in the back. Here's the fuel rail. That needs to be reinstalled with all of the lines to the direct injectors. We have the oil filter housing here. I forget what this is. I think maybe this is the oil pressure sensor for the back of the filter housing. Nope, that's that one. This must be from somewhere down underneath the intake manifold, maybe crankshaft position sensor, I'm not sure. We got the used throttle body that came off the car. We have the oil cooler assembly here with an assortment of hardware. Looks like we also have intake manifold gaskets to go with the intake manifold. We have both of the old aftermarket air intakes, which I will probably bypass using those and go back to the factory air box because you guys know me, I'm a bit of an OE purist. We have the old direct injectors. We also have aftermarket coolant flange for underneath the oil filter housing right there. We got the charge pipe. We got some more direct injectors. We also have a new throttle body gasket, new oil cooler gasket, new oil filter housing gasket. Looks like we even have some used fuel pumps from in the back, and then this is one of those little strut bars. So all in all, we got a bunch of parts that came with this thing. We also have the engine cover, we have the old valve cover, and we have that little ram air piece, and then some other miscellaneous stuff too. So let's put this thing up in the air and get a list of what she needs. That was the sound of those lift pads slipping into the factory spots, because this car is missing all of the factory little lift pads, but that front right one didn't settle in. So don't forget your hood lock. It's just a cheap little piece, fits around the hood strut, locks it in place so the hood can't come down. It's worth it. Always give it a shake test, whether it's on a 2-post lift or jack stands or whatever. Give it a good shake test. First thing I noticed is this thing has an aftermarket windshield in it, and it also has a big fat crack running down through the bottom right corner. And up here at the top corners, this glass is like really flowing down. This windshield seal is not in place whatsoever. It doesn't look like the right glass for the car. It's also got this interesting tint to it. I think this thing's going to need a windshield. It's definitely going to need a top windshield seal, and it's going to need a lower cowl because this thing is just coming apart. Now, a lot of people would think that you don't really need to replace these moldings for any other reason than cosmetics, but you do have the electronics box right here. You have the computer, you have a bunch of different harnesses, and I've seen water intrusion come through on a lot of different BMW models and cause a lot more problems. So when you keep the cosmetic stuff looking nice, you also avoid future issues like that as well. Like this thing was just loose too, so it's good to have all that stuff buttoned up. Looks like someone went with an aftermarket microfilter housing, probably before Anthony, but you lose all that protection of water shedding, and then that water runs over into these little traps. So sometimes it's nice to keep that factory stuff. I think these are all new direct injectors, so we'll have to put these into ISTA. You got to put the index numbers, you have to index the injectors. There's a set of numbers on the injectors, and you have to tell the computer what injectors you have in the car, but hopefully ISTA will connect to this one and we'll be able to do it no problem. Anthony says it does need turbos. He said the turbos had failed, so that's why they came with the car. He had bought them and was planning on replacing them. So that's going to be a big job that we're going to have to tackle on this car. Both turbos, exhaust manifolds, and then all the oil and coolant lines for those turbos as well. Now when we do those turbos, it's good to replace this plastic pipe as well, because that's like the turbo mouthpiece, and it fits into the front and it gets really brittle. I've seen them break all the time. They cause boost leaks all the time. We're going to have to reinstall this oil filter housing with the cooler. We got the oil cooler lines here. We'll put new O-rings on there as well. I think Anthony shipped some out to me. He had some at the house. Probably need to go through the serpentine belt assembly, see if any of that needs repairing. Luckily, these N54 tensioners are a lot stronger than the N52s, and they don't have the same failure point, but they do tend to fail over time as well. This is a completely different design than the N52 as far as like right up here in the top left corner of the serpentine belt assembly goes. The alternator's different. AC compressors mounted over here as opposed to down over there, and it's just a little different. Plus you got this pain in the ass charge pipe in the way whenever you need to get into the belt. Looks like we got some silicone vacuum lines. I'm pretty pumped that he replaced the high pressure fuel pump too, because it's super common on these N54s and they're not cheap. They're usually a couple $100. I haven't looked in a long time, but we also got this bitchin' new valve cover that he installed too, so we'll see how this thing operates when we fire it up, but it feels like aluminum. Another thing I noticed at Anthony's house is these intake valves are hammered with carbon. They all need carbon cleaning. It's going to be choking this intake up. Sorry for the poor focus, guys. It's always difficult to get photos of these intake valves, but all of them need carbon cleaning. They're usually due every like 60 to 100K depending on driving conditions for these N54s. We used to do them quite a lot, and you use a walnut shell and you media blast the back side of the intake valves with a shop vac attachment on there. Now the reason for all this carbon buildup is on standard fuel injected cars, the fuel injectors are in the intake manifold. So the fuel sprays and then it saturates the back side of the intake valve as the fuel and the air is getting pulled into the combustion chamber. But on this car, the fuel injectors are right here and they go directly down into the combustion chamber. So all that's coming through on this backside is air. So all that carbon back feeds out of the combustion chamber onto the back of the intake valves, and there's no fuel coming through the back of it to saturate it and clean it off. You know how Chevron advertises with Techron and shows spraying off the back of the intake valve and getting it all clean. Yeah, not on the N54. And that's one of the downsides to direct injected cars is, one, the injectors are very expensive. I think they're like piezo crystal injectors. Usually a couple $100 a piece. You have to index them. They fail quite often, and it creates this carbon buildup on the intake valves. Other than that, though, I'm not really seeing anything underneath the intake manifold that we're going to have to fix besides getting all this put back together and trying to remember how to put these N54s back together, because I haven't worked on one for quite a few years. Those were not very tight. I have not touched these lug bolts yet. That wheel was hanging on by a thread. So starting in the front right, we got a pretty rusted rotor. We still have plenty of meat on the brake life. The inside pad looks good as well. We're missing that front right fender well, and we're missing a cover. Missing the cover off of this daytime running light, the halos, and those wires, of course, are coming apart. The insulation always chips off of them, and they end up shorting. Although we do have some really nice access to one of those studs on the turbocharger, so I'll have to remember that. Rear right, we got the rusty rotor. We got some decent life left on the pad still. Inside pad looks good too. You can still see the entirety of the sensor. That little nub right there, once that little nub gets cut through, that's when your brake light triggers. About 2 millimeters. We had a member in my Discord community, his shock mount blew through the trunk, I think on his E60. So if you guys are interested in jumping into a free Discord group with a bunch of like-minded, awesome individuals all over the world, talking BMW, supporting each other, and just being friends, I will leave the link for that in the description down below. It's pretty sick. Rear left, same story, rusty rotor, a little bit of brake life left, no need to do brakes. Front left, missing that fender well again, also missing the cover for that daytime running light bulb there. It'd be good to get fender covers back in here. And again, same story on the brakes. Plenty of meat in front of the sensor. And this strut is leaking. You can see once they start to leak from underneath that coil spring there, that's the telltale sign that the strut is leaking. So this thing could use some suspension. The tires have plenty of life on them. We'll have to see if they're balanced once we get the car running. But the rear left tire does have a slow leak, so we'll have to investigate, see where that's coming from. And this front left fog needs some love. Oh dang, we don't have any underbody panels. This thing is soaked with oil. Covered. Holy cow, wow. Oh, that front right strut's starting to leak a little bit too. I can see that better now. Before I show you all this oil, let's check this control arm bushing. Feels pretty soft. If you get a pry bar on the side of them, and you get a flashlight in, you can usually look for tears and cracks, and this one's definitely torn. You can also see some evidence right there of leaking. These control arm bushings are fluid filled. If you don't believe me, check my E90 restoration video, Going for Broke, restoring a BMW and giving it away. I cut these bushings open and I proved that they are fluid filled. Alright, I'm going to try to give you guys as best of a look as I can, but check it out. This is the front rack and pinion. Here's the front subframe, and this is just completely saturated. We have active leaks coming down off the sway bar. Coolant pipe's got oil on it. Intercooler looks okay. Radiator doesn't seem to be leaking. But going back, this trans pan is just so covered in oil, so we're absolutely going to have to pressure wash this thing off and get her cleaned up before we can just continue going forward with honestly anything. So I think I got a good idea on where I want to start. Classic E90 transmission mounts look to be in good shape. The flex disc, I don't see any cracking or tearing in it, so that's a nice sign, but that's sort of a secondary issue. It's not really related to all the other repairs that we need to do to this thing already. This car definitely had some collisions because this underbody panel is just so chewed up, and this is the one that meets up to the rocker over there, and you only really smash these up when you drive over stuff really hard, jump curbs or whatever. It's definitely a big sign that this car has been used and abused, because making our way back we got more of the same. Another random flapper doodle just hanging out. I don't even think this thing goes here. That's why it was all spun around. This one goes up in the front and then it bolts up like that, but we'll just end up taking that out. Let's bring this all the way back to the end so I only have to do this once. There's gonna be more issues that come up, guys, but my main priority is gonna be getting this engine put back together. Differential bushing, I've talked about it before. These ones just don't fail, and we'll have to see after driving the car if there's anything in the rear end that feels loose. But these E90 rear ends, honestly, the suspension in them holds up really well. And then we got the factory exhaust, and that hasn't been tampered with. Looks like we still have the vacuum line onto that little exhaust valve, so not too bad. So here's what I got so far. I used 1s for highest priority, 2s for next, and 3s for preventative maintenance, back burner type stuff. Carbon cleaning on the intake valves, turbocharger replacement with hoses, reinstalling the oil filter housing with the cooler and new oil cooler hose O-rings, reinstall the intake manifold, put those fuel lines back on, new gaskets on the manifold and throttle body, both front struts are leaking, both front fender wells, covers for the halo bulbs, windshield with new seal and molding, rear window seals, needs a battery, nail in the rear left tire. Front left fog light falling off, control arm bushings, torn and leaking, engine clean, and oil pan gasket with mounts. Oh, I need to add headlight restoration on there too. And headlights, guys. Now there is a lot to take in on this car, and it can be a little overwhelming if you just try to jump into all of it at once. So my game plan is to get this car running without replacing the turbochargers, without dropping the subframe and doing the oil pan. So that means I need to start over here first. But I'm not going to put the intake manifold back on until I get those intake valves cleaned up. So what I'm thinking right now is I'm doing some research on a cheap carbon cleaning kit. That way I can show all you at-home N54 owners how to do your own carbon cleaning and your own carbon removal on this engine. So I think that's where I'm going to start. Get that carbon cleaned up, put the intake manifold back on, reinstall the filter housing, reinstall the oil cooler, get that system buttoned up, throw some oil in it, fire it up, and see how she runs. Maybe even take it for a little hot lap, and then we can go into potentially doing the turbochargers, dropping the subframe, doing the oil pan, engine mounts, all that other stuff. Now my thought process on making content on this car for you guys is like carbon cleaning. We'll do one separate video for that. Removal of the carbon on the back of the intake valves, putting the intake manifold back on, and getting the car running again. Then maybe another video we'll do turbochargers and oil pan, because that all includes dropping down the subframe. Another video we can do front struts and control arm bushings, and we'll kind of do it like that. So you guys can see the build in more of detail and depth. I can share more tips and tricks for the individual jobs, and we got more content. I'm going to head inside, do some research on this carbon cleaning tool, and try to get something ordered up. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to follow along with this build and restoration series, be sure to subscribe to my channel down below. And if you'd like to keep in touch in between videos, as well as meeting some other awesome human beings, check out the Discord link in my description as well. It is completely free. And of course, a big shout out to my members and patrons for supporting me on this journey of being a YouTube content creator full time. I really appreciate the support, guys. I hope you enjoyed, or I hope you learned something new, and I will see you all on my next day off. Cheers. Say bye, Sage. Bye-bye.